where we're going to unpack a pretty fascinating reality about wealth in Australia in 2026. Now, if you picture a multimillionaire, you're probably imagining luxury cars, waterfront mansions, the whole shebang. But here's the real question. How many Australians actually have $3 million or more in net worth? And more importantly, what does it actually take to get there? Stick around, because the answer is going to completely mess with how you think about money.
There's a couple in Melbourne right now. They're in their mid-50s, and they have a 2018 Toyota Corolla parked in the driveway. If you bump into them at Coles, they're still comparing prices before they buy the mints. Honestly, nothing about how they live says wealthy. There's no boat, no flashy renovation, no massive overseas trips on the calendar.
So, looking at this completely average, totally unassuming household, I want to ask you a question. How much do you think they're actually worth? If you took their house, their retirement accounts, their savings, and subtracted any debt, what number would you land on? Seriously, take a guess.
$3 million. No, that is not a typo. If you added up everything they own tonight, they'd be sitting on more money than 95 out of every 100 households in this country. That's the reality of wealth in Australia today, and as you can see, it looks absolutely nothing like what social media or television has told us to expect. Okay, let's dive into Section 1, Australia's real wealth numbers, peeking behind the macro curtain.
The ABS put total household wealth in this country at $19.2 trillion as of March 2026, and KPMG's modeling from May breaks that down for us. It shows the average household wealth in Australia is an impressive $1.56 million. But average is a really tricky word because it gets dragged incredibly high by a tiny handful of billionaires and ultra-rich households. The median, the honest number, the one right smack in the middle that isn't skewed, sits at just $700,000. That gap right there tells you the whole story of the wealth divide in this country. But here's where things get kind of wild. According to the UBS Global Wealth Report from June 2026, Australia now has close to 2 million US dollar millionaires. In Aussie dollars, hitting $1.6 million isn't quite as rare as it used to be. Today, households worth more than $1.6 million make up 22% of the country. Why? Well, because owning a home in a capital city, combined with 30 years of mandatory super contributions, basically gets you over that mark without having to try too hard. So while $1.6 million is fairly common, $3 million is the real cliff face. Based on the latest ABS and Grattan Institute modeling, a household net worth of $3 million or more catapults you straight into the top 5% of Australia. You're somewhere between the 95th and 96th percentile. Out of every 100 households, maybe 4 or 5 have ever crossed this line. It's a completely different tier. Which brings us to Section 2, the boring wealth formula. No hacks, no shortcuts. Look at this. Property is doing the vast majority of the heavy lifting. Around 56% of all Australian household wealth is tied up in land and housing. The remaining 44% is everything else: super, shares, cash, and business assets. Here's what really surprised me when digging into this. It's not lottery wins. It's not crypto. For most people, it's not even a massive inheritance. When you actually look at the households sitting above that 3 million mark, the exact same 4 unglamorous things show up over and over again. A property in a capital city held for the long term. A super account that got fed steadily for decades, without fail. A share portfolio built through boring, regular purchases. And a career or small business that quietly produced a little extra income year after year. There are literally no hacks here, just the same boring formula repeated for 20 or 30 years. Let's walk through the actual math of how this happens. Step 1. Buy a modest place in Sydney or Melbourne for $400,000 back in the early 2000s. Step 2. The market does its thing and grows that property's value to $2.2 million over a couple of decades. Step 3. You pair that fully offset mortgage with a decent super balance. Super is the quiet second engine most people underrate. A couple contributing the minimum, plus maybe a tiny bit extra, from age 25 to 60 can easily retire with a combined balance of $1.2 to $1.8 million. Put a paid-off home and that super balance together, and the maths basically writes itself. You're knocking on the $3 million door without ever earning a huge salary. Moving on to Section 3, the generational wealth divide. And yeah, this is the uncomfortable reality for the under 40s. If you're under 40 and it feels like $3 million is drifting further out of reach every single year, you're not imagining it. The 2026 numbers from the Grattan Institute are pretty stark. For households aged 25 to 40, typical wealth sits around $330,000. But for households aged 41 to 64, that jumps to $959,000, almost 3 times as much. The latter is demonstrably getting harder to climb because buying that foundational capital city property requires so much more upfront cash today. And KPMG's numbers tell the exact same story from a slightly different angle. We're seeing a rapidly shrinking middle class. The wealth bracket between $300,000 and $900,000 is just vanishing. Meanwhile, the group worth over $1.6 million is growing at 3 times the normal rate. Basically, wealth in this country is aggressively stacking up at the top.
So, what can we do? That's Section 4, Moving the Wealth Needle. Let's look at the 3 levers you actually control.
The first lever is time. Time in the market beats timing the market hands down. Say you're a 30-year-old right now, putting just $1,500 a month into a diversified index fund. Assuming an average 8% return, you'll have over $2.1 million by age 60 from that one single habit alone. Add your super and home equity on top of that, and suddenly $3 million completely stops being a fantasy. The second lever is your savings rate. Believe it or not, your massive income isn't everything. A household earning $250,000 but spending $240,000 of it just to keep up appearances, they will never get there. Now look at the other side. A household earning $130,000 that saves and invests 30% of it. Given enough time, they absolutely will. The households in that top 5% aren't always the highest earners, but for sure, they are almost always the most consistent savers. The third lever is debt discipline. This is what separates growing wealth from leaking wealth. The households sitting above $3 million aren't the ones with the newest cars on novated leases or maxed out platinum cards. They strictly use debt to buy appreciating assets, and then they relentlessly pay it down while their investments quietly compound in the background. Finally, Section 5, what nobody tells you. Let's talk about the real prize of $3 million. First off, remember that somewhere between 430,000 and 540,000 Australian households are sitting in this club right now. That is a massive group of people. It's a number big enough to prove that reaching this level is absolutely possible, but small enough to prove it doesn't happen by accident. And when you talk to these households, the ones driving the 2018 Corollas and checking the mince prices at Kohl's, they'll all tell you the exact same thing. Crossing $3 million doesn't actually change your lifestyle. You don't suddenly start wearing silk pajamas and eating caviar. What changes is the pressure. The 3 a.m. worry about losing your job? Gone. The panic over a surprise bill? Faded. That is the real prize, not the number on the screen, but the profound, quiet freedom that it buys. So I want to leave you with this. If hitting that top 5% isn't about being flashy, but rather about buying lifelong freedom from the 3 a.m. worry, what boring, unglamorous financial habit are you going to start today? Whether it's setting up an automated investment, fixing your savings rate, or just paying down bad debt, the path is clear. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this changes how you look at the journey to true wealth.